There comes a moment in every kind woman's life when she looks into the mirror and barely recognizes the person she became for a man who never truly appreciated her. That single moment becomes the beginning of everything changing. People spend a lot of time talking about what happens when a man walks away, yet very few speak about what happens when a kind woman is hurt so deeply that she quietly disconnects from the relationship, not because she's angry, not because she wants revenge, but because her heart is exhausted and she finally understands that real love should never feel like constantly begging to be chosen. What many men fail to see is that hurting a good woman doesn't simply break her heart. It wakes something inside her. It pushes her into a completely different version of herself. And once she rises from that pain, she is never the same again. She doesn't cry the same way. She doesn't wait forever. She doesn't leave the door open for someone who kept walking away from her emotionally. This isn't a story about bitterness. It's about reality. Honest, uncomfortable reality that many people avoid because it forces them to face their own choices. Stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Very few people tell you the real cost of losing someone who loved you sincerely when you had nothing left to offer. We're going to explore exactly what happens emotionally, mentally, and spiritually when a man takes a truly good woman for granted. You'll see how she changes, why he often regrets it too late, and why her silence becomes stronger than any goodbye she could ever say. If you've ever quietly walked away after giving everything, or if you've wondered why she suddenly stopped trying, this may reveal answers most conversations never touch. Because after the pain settles, what comes next isn't revenge, it's complete transformation. When a good woman gets hurt, it almost never happens in a single moment. It's a slow unraveling that happens little by little. She doesn't wake up one day and suddenly stop caring. She stays longer than most people would. She keeps trying. She keeps believing. She keeps holding on long after she should have let go. She pushes aside her own needs just to protect the relationship, and that's exactly why her pain becomes so deep. It quietly grows beneath the surface where almost nobody notices. She is the woman who forgives more times than anyone ever realizes. She finds reasons to excuse his behavior. She continues believing in who he could become even while his actions keep proving otherwise. She remains loyal, dependable, supportive, hoping that one day he'll finally recognize her worth, value everything she's given, and return the same love she's been offering from the beginning. But he doesn't. Not because he's incapable, but because he convinces himself she'll never really leave. And that's where the deepest wound begins. Good women don't simply offer company. They invest their entire heart into the person they choose. So when that love is met with betrayal, disrespect, emotional neglect, manipulation, or repeated disappointment, the damage reaches places words can barely describe. It's more than heartbreak. It's the loss of trust, the loss of emotional safety, sometimes even the loss of her own identity. She quietly starts asking herself painful questions. Was I never enough? Did I love too deeply? Could I have done anything differently? While those questions echo inside her, everyone else still sees the same smiling woman showing up every day pretending she's okay. That's what makes her strength so misunderstood. She rarely falls apart where everyone can watch. Behind closed doors, though, the tears become endless, the confusion becomes overwhelming, and the disappointment becomes almost impossible to carry. But here's what most people never realize. Little by little, something begins to change. Not overnight, not dramatically. Her silence becomes longer. Her patience becomes smaller. She stops explaining herself over and over. She stops asking to be understood. Carrying the relationship by herself becomes too heavy. The woman who once fought for every conversation now simply watches. The woman who gave everything begins holding pieces of herself back. She slowly detaches emotionally, not because she stopped caring, but because she's finally learning that she has to care about herself too. The hardest truth is that she may still love him deeply. Those feelings don't disappear overnight. The difference is that she no longer abandons herself just to keep someone else comfortable. She refuses to remain where she constantly feels invisible, unheard, and unappreciated. The sad irony is that many men don't realize she's leaving until she's already emotionally gone. While he believed she would always stay, she had already walked away inside her heart. Sometimes her goodbye isn't spoken aloud. Sometimes it's hidden in the way she no longer argues, in the way her eyes stop shining, and in the way she protects her peace instead of chasing someone's attention. She isn't searching for revenge. She's searching for healing. She rebuilds herself. She grows stronger. And one day he'll search for pieces of her in everyone he meets, while she'll already be living as someone who no longer recognizes the woman who once waited for him to finally change. That's when the emotional consequences finally begin to appear. He starts thinking about the little things he once overlooked. Her kindness, her constant support when no one else stood beside him. The way she believed in him during the moments he couldn't believe in himself. He remembers her loyalty, her patience, her warmth, and suddenly those qualities no longer seem ordinary. They become priceless. They become impossible to replace. He tries to distract himself. Maybe he throws himself into work. Maybe he surrounds himself with new people. Maybe he even starts another relationship. But no matter where he goes or who he's with, something never feels complete. A space remains that nothing seems able to fill. That's because what she gave him was never just attention. It was sincere care. It was genuine love offered without conditions. And once someone has experienced that kind of love from a truly good woman, shallow affection never feels enough again. He begins replaying old memories over and over, the words he spoke without thinking, the words he should have said but never did, the times she cried while he stayed emotionally distant, the nights she needed comfort but received silence instead. Looking back now, he realizes those were the exact moments she was quietly slipping away. Regret is one of the heaviest emotions a person can carry, especially when understanding arrives after everything is already gone. Stay with me, because this next part explains what so many people fail to recognize. He doesn't just miss her presence. He begins missing the version of himself that only existed while she loved him. She believed in his future. She encouraged him when life became difficult. She made ordinary days feel lighter. Now, without her, everything feels colder, louder, and strangely empty. Slowly, he understands that good women don't remain where they feel unseen or taken for granted. Her leaving wasn't driven by pride. It was driven by survival. And no matter how many times he wishes he could change the past, he cannot return to the moment before she stopped needing him. The deepest pain isn't simply losing her. It's realizing she may have been the greatest blessing in his life, and he was the one who let her go. That realization doesn't disappear after a few days. Sometimes it stays for years. Sometimes it follows a person for the rest of their life. Because once a man truly understands that he lost a woman who would have stood beside him through almost anything, he also realizes how incredibly rare that kind of love really was. Healing never arrives all at once. It begins quietly, during the moments when the tears no longer fall every night, yet the ache still remains somewhere deep inside. It starts when she finally stops checking her phone, hoping for a message that never comes. It begins when she no longer spends every day trying to understand why everything ended the way it did. That's where real healing starts. Not through closure from someone else, but through acceptance growing inside her own heart. In the beginning, the process is far from easy. She has to face every emotion she buried beneath her strength. She has to grieve not only the relationship itself, but also the version of herself she became just to keep everything together. The woman who constantly overgave, the woman who accepted less than she deserved, the woman who slowly disappeared while trying to heal someone else. She finally understands that what she called love was often self-abandonment wearing the disguise of loyalty. From that realization, everything slowly begins to change. She rebuilds her life quietly, without announcing it to the world. She takes back her mornings. She invests her energy into herself instead of someone who was never prepared to receive it. She writes her thoughts down. She prays. She reconnects with the dreams she placed on hold, the passions she ignored, and the confidence that once came so naturally. Day by day, she begins feeling something she hasn't experienced in a very long time. She starts feeling like herself again. She no longer depends on his approval to feel worthy. She no longer waits for an apology before allowing herself to heal. She realizes that the forgiveness she needed most wasn't from him at all. It was from herself, for staying too long, giving too much, and forgetting her own value while trying to save someone else. But here's what makes her transformation so powerful. It happens quietly. It isn't performed for attention. It isn't displayed for strangers to applaud. It grows through peaceful mornings, long walks, deep breaths, honest conversations with herself, and difficult nights where she repeatedly chooses peace instead of familiar pain. Being alone no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like coming home to the woman she was always meant to become. Then one day everything feels different. The songs that once brought tears now bring peaceful memories. The moments that once haunted her lose their power. She dresses up because it makes her happy. She laughs freely again. She sets healthy boundaries without guilt. She says no when necessary without feeling ashamed. She trusts herself again, trusts her instincts, trusts her voice, and trusts her worth. She no longer waits for someone else to choose her because she has finally chosen herself completely. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this: she doesn't hate him. She doesn't spend her days wishing him pain. Healing has made her gentler, not bitter, wiser, not colder, stronger, while allowing her kindness to remain. She refuses to carry resentment because she knows it would only keep her tied to a chapter she worked so hard to leave behind. Her healing doesn't make her unreachable. It makes her naturally magnetic, not because she needs someone to complete her, but because she has finally become whole on her own. And whether he admits it or not, he'll feel that change. By the time he fully understands what he lost, she has already outgrown the woman she used to be. She is no longer the same person who once waited for him. She is stronger, freer, more confident, and more aware of her own value than ever before. She isn't looking behind anymore. She's focused on creating what's ahead. The life she's building now is grounded in peace, purpose, and quiet strength. Her healing was never about forgetting him. It was about finding herself again. That journey, painful, meaningful, and deeply life-changing, became the most beautiful chapter she had ever lived. Her transformation doesn't arrive with applause or dramatic moments. It happens quietly, after the storm has passed, after countless tears, endless nights of overthinking, and questions that never received answers. She doesn't wake up one morning suddenly feeling completely healed. Instead, each day she notices something changing inside her. She's stronger. She's clearer. She's more connected to herself. The pain no longer defines who she is. She remembers it, of course. It shaped her. It taught her valuable lessons, but it no longer controls her life. She no longer wakes up carrying that heavy weight across her chest. The knot in her stomach slowly disappears. The endless replay of old memories becomes quieter with time. In its place comes purpose, clarity, peace. The woman she's becoming doesn't beg to be loved. She becomes love itself. She doesn't chase, convince, or make herself smaller just to be accepted. She carries herself with self-respect. She walks with boundaries that don't need endless explanations. Her time, her energy, and her heart are no longer handed out freely because she finally understands her value, not only through words, but through the choices she makes every single day. What once nearly destroyed her has now become the very thing that strengthens her. She stops searching for closure from someone who was never willing to provide it. Instead, she gives herself permission to move forward without receiving the apology she once waited for. In doing so, she quietly takes back her power. She no longer depends on someone else's presence to feel complete because she has discovered that completeness inside herself. Stay with me because this next realization changes everything. She carries herself differently now, not with arrogance, not with loud confidence, but with a calm strength that speaks without saying much. Her confidence is visible in her ability to walk away from what no longer serves her. It's reflected in her refusal to settle for empty effort, mixed signals, or temporary attention. People begin noticing the difference. There's something calmer in her smile, something stronger behind her eyes. She speaks with intention. She trusts her own voice. She no longer over-explains herself or tries to convince people she's worthy of love. She already knows she is, and anyone who cannot recognize that simply isn't meant to walk beside her. She has also become more compassionate, not less. The pain she experienced didn't make her cold. It made her wiser. It deepened her understanding of people and strengthened her emotional awareness. She notices intentions more clearly. She recognizes unhealthy patterns sooner. She can sense when someone's actions don't match their words. That's not fear speaking. That's wisdom earned through difficult experiences. Real transformation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming genuine, honest, authentic, unapologetically yourself. She accepts her imperfections, respects her journey, and embraces every lesson without shame. She doesn't feel the need to announce her growth because people naturally notice it in the way she carries herself, the way she communicates, and the way she loves. Once she believed love meant sacrificing herself. Now she understands that healthy love feels safe, balanced, respectful, and mutual. She no longer fears spending time alone. What she fears now is remaining in places where she has to hide who she truly is just to be accepted. Perhaps the most powerful part of her growth is this. She no longer needs closure from him. She doesn't need him to return, admit his mistakes, or finally recognize her value. She already knows what she brought into the relationship. She always knew. She simply loved someone who wasn't ready for the depth she offered. Now she isn't waiting for someone to love her correctly. She's creating space for the right love to naturally enter her life. She keeps moving forward, not with bitterness, but with wisdom, not emotionally closed, but intentionally selective, not guarded by fear, but guided by awareness. She understands exactly what it cost her to lose herself in the name of love, and she refuses to pay that price ever again. She didn't simply recover from heartbreak. She evolved into someone stronger than she ever imagined. Redefining self-worth doesn't begin the day someone walks away. It begins the day she realizes she was never meant to beg for love in the first place. As the pain slowly fades, she begins seeing herself through a completely different perspective. Not through the pain of being left behind, but through the strength of finally choosing herself. She recognizes old patterns she once ignored. She notices how often she dimmed her own light just to keep others comfortable. She remembers apologizing for being too much, when in reality she was simply offering a level of honesty and love that someone else wasn't prepared to receive. She gave endless second chances because she believed love required endless endurance. Now she understands that love also requires self-respect. She no longer accepts half-hearted effort. Empty promises no longer impress her. Sweet words without consistent actions no longer move her. She sees beyond appearances now. Her self-worth is reflected in the standards she maintains, the boundaries she protects, and the peace she refuses to exchange simply to avoid being alone. This new version of her doesn't fear losing people anymore. She fears losing herself for people. She understands that anyone who expects her to silence her truth, ignore her needs, abandon her values, or question her worth was never meant to remain in her life. She no longer fights to prove she's enough because she already knows she always was. She simply knows her value now, and if someone fails to recognize it, she'll quietly walk away. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with complete certainty. She no longer believes she needs to be repaired because she was never truly broken. She simply outgrew the places that could no longer hold the woman she was becoming. Now she's intentional about where she invests her energy, who she allows into her life, and what she welcomes into her world. Her version definition of self-love looks very different these days. It isn't only found in comforting routines or positive words, it's found in difficult decisions. It's choosing peace over approval. It's saying no without guilt. It's walking away from people who constantly drain her. It's embracing solitude instead of accepting less than she deserves. It's standing beside herself even when no one else does. She surrounds herself with people who genuinely see her, who appreciate her without conditions, who never feel threatened by either her strength or her softness. They make her feel safe instead of making her question herself. That's the kind of love she accepts now because it reflects the love she's finally learned to give herself. Her self-worth is no longer fragile or easily shaken. It's deeply rooted in truth, resilience, and the simple reality that she has always been enough exactly as she is. She no longer runs after validation because she no longer needs anyone else to define her value. Her presence, her kindness, and her energy speak louder than words ever could. She understands she's not meant for everyone, and she's completely at peace with that. She's no longer trying to fit into places where she doesn't belong. She's focused on living honestly, staying true to herself, and protecting the peace she's worked so hard to build. Stay with me, because this is where everything comes together. She isn't rebuilding herself to become the woman she was before the heartbreak. She's becoming someone even stronger than she ever imagined, more grounded, more self-aware, more complete. In rediscovering her worth, she didn't create a brand new version of herself. She simply remembered the woman she had always been beneath the pain. Her comeback was never truly about proving anyone wrong. At one point she thought it might be. When the wounds were still fresh and every memory still hurt, she imagined the day he would see her thriving and finally understand everything he had lost. She wanted him to experience even a small piece of the heartbreak she had carried alone. She wanted him to understand the weight of every tear and every lonely night spent loving someone who couldn't meet her halfway. But time changed her perspective. Healing reshaped her heart. She realized her comeback wasn't fueled by bitterness. It was born from renewal. It wasn't about earning his regret. It was about finally showing up for herself. She understood that revenge would only keep her connected to the very pain she was trying to escape. It would leave her happiness depending on the actions of the person who once hurt her. Healing asked something greater of her. It asked her to release the need to be understood by someone who never truly listened. It invited her to rise through self-respect instead of resentment. From that moment forward, every step she took became meaningful. Every healthy boundary she created, every no she once feared saying, every tear she no longer cried, every peaceful morning she woke without carrying the same emotional weight, those became victories. Not because they punished someone else, but because they set her free. Her transformation wasn't only visible on the outside, it happened within her heart, her mind, and her spirit. She didn't simply change her appearance, she changed the way she viewed herself. She carried herself differently. She spoke with greater confidence. She loved from a healthier place. She no longer searched for approval, applause, or even closure, because she had already become all the closure she needed. And maybe one day he'll see her living happily and quietly, feel the loss of what he let go. But that isn't what drives her anymore. She isn't looking over her shoulder hoping he'll regret his choices. She's too busy creating a life she genuinely loves, too focused on becoming the woman she once desperately needed, too fulfilled by her own peace to be distracted by yesterday, because true strength isn't found in making someone else suffer. It's found in healing so completely that they no longer have the ability to hurt you. Her comeback is calm, yet incredibly powerful. It shows in her peace. It shows in her confidence. It shows in the quiet way she carries herself, fully authentic, deeply secure, and completely whole. She isn't trying to make anyone feel small. She's simply honoring the size of her heart by giving it only where it's truly valued. In the end, her greatest victory isn't revenge at all. It's the peace she protects, the freedom she enjoys, and the joy she has built for herself. Those are things no one can ever take away again. If there's one lesson she carries forward, it's this. Being a good woman never meant accepting mistreatment. Her kindness is not weakness. Her loyalty is not permission to be taken for granted. Her love remains rare, deep, and powerful, but now she offers it only to people who have earned the privilege of receiving it. This journey taught her that healing isn't always straightforward and growth is rarely comfortable. Every difficult step mattered because today she isn't merely surviving. She's truly living. She is no longer defined by the pain she experienced. She is defined by the strength she discovered while rising above it. The heartbreak didn't destroy her. It shaped her into someone wiser, stronger, and more aware. It sharpened her instincts, strengthened her standards, and awakened a version of herself that refuses to settle for less. She has learned to respect her emotions, trust her intuition, and fiercely protect her peace. That isn't just confidence, it's real transformation. So what comes next? She continues walking with purpose. She decides how she deserves to be treated. She no longer waits for someone else to choose her because she chooses herself every single day. And when love enters her life again, it will have to meet the standard she now lives by instead of asking her to lower it. The next chapter of her life is filled with joy, healthy boundaries, gentleness, confidence, and genuine connection. It's about living on her own terms and surrounding herself with people who reflect the same love she now gives herself. To every woman hearing these words, your worth never disappeared because someone else failed to recognize it. You were never too much. You simply offered a depth that not everyone was prepared to receive. Keep moving forward. Keep healing. Keep becoming. Remember, your comeback has never been about the person who hurt you. It's about the incredible woman you're becoming, and that woman is stronger than she has ever believed possible.